Some would say igtheism is irrelevant to the question of belief. With all due respect, I would maintain that it's actually the default position and a valid alternative to the false dichotomy I debunked in my last video. Hopefully this is the last time we have to do this. Hi YouTube. Well, it's taken me a while and several attempts to make this video, and probably not for the reasons you may be thinking. As some of you may know, last week I set the cat amongst the pigeons in the atheist community by... No, not you. Stop posturing. Back in your box. Where was I? Yes, last week I set the cat, overturned the apple cart of false dichotomy that was the rallying cry of many an ardent card-carrying anti-pistivist here on YouTube. Since then, a fair number of people have made follow-up videos expressing their own reasons for opting out of the so-called binary set concerning belief in atheistic God. Among some of the most notable are those scrolling up the screen, if, or should be, if Ethel's done her job properly in post. There have also been videos and comments left as responses on those videos, including mine, by those desperate to maintain the validity of this binary set, continuing to cite as cowards others for not proclaiming themselves the atheists they so obviously are. The main thrust of the argument against the neutral position I put forward, igtheism, as well as the better known and accepted agnostic position that many have justly reclaimed, is that they are irrelevant. And despite her assertions on my comments that it wasn't worth her time, even Bionic Dance has kindly put out a video last week explaining in a Venn diagram just how irrelevant igtheism truly is. Given the furore over the past week and those clamouring for it to be a non-issue, I had decided not to bother with a follow-up, as I actually achieved what I set out to do, and that was to get people actually thinking about the positions and exploring the various alternatives to the "you're either with us or you're against us" previously offered. And nice as it was, there was something about that Venn diagram that really troubled me to the point I promised Kate I'd give her response to it in her comments.
Yeah, but she hates you.
No, she doesn't hate me.
She told you to die in a fire.
She didn't mean it literally. She was simply frustrated with everyone siding against her in my comment section that night. You know, it was one of those things. Stuff got said, tempers flared, things got thrown. We get over these things, you know how it works.
And she blocked you.
That was temporary. She unblocked me when she posted the Venn diagram the following day. Otherwise, how could I respond now?
Well, all sounds a bit too much like burning hell to me. I had too much of that from my ex.
Yeah, well, you're well away from him now, so you should be fine.
Well, I'm not so sure. I could have sworn I heard his voice last night.
Well, that's very unlikely. Anyway, I promised her a response to her Venn diagram.
Like yours better.
Well, thank you. So do I, now that it makes sense.
Are you going to show it to him then?
Yeah, okay. So, this is the Venn diagram that you left us with. as we can see, we've got the whole group, which by definition would be all the possibilities for belief. And as you have, I've got it split into theist and not theist. And we've got this little bubble of strong atheism on one side, strong theism on the other side, and this group encompassing the two, which I believe you labelled belief defined. Now, apart from the fact that I don't think you can actually start with your whole group already split into a dichotomy in order to prove a dichotomy, but as I said, I want to give this a chance, so we'll take it as this. But one thing you can see from my diagram that wasn't clear in yours is that in the purple group here we still have the bipolar split, the binary set between theism and not a theist, still maintained in the pale fuchsia and the dark fuchsia, with weak atheism on one side, weak theism on the other, which would by nature encompass moderate theists and your run-of-the-mill, just don't have a belief, lacking belief atheists. So that dichotomy is still maintained within belief or deity or theism defined group. Now, given the nature of the debates that have floated around YouTube, I'm going to throw in a control group here just to help illustrate why this isn't where the Venn diagram stops. Babies. Now, standard thinking is that babies are currently considered atheists because they have no inherent belief in a deity, so are, by definition, innate atheists, which is fine, and yes, this is still making sense. However, in order to balance the Venn diagram, the opposing group would need to be innate theists. So, unless it is possible for there to be such a thing as an innate theist, that's an error. And without having something labelled that side, we don't have a valid Venn diagram, because we've got a group that it remains unclassified over on the theist side. So the only way to make this work is to get rid of that dichotomy, which is fine, because within belief defined, it is still there. You've still got weak atheist, weak theist, strong atheist, strong theist, and on the outside we still have our control group, babies, which are ignorant of, they are ignorant of the entire concept. And the other thing that is missing, you've got the fuchsia group, the purple group, as belief or deity or theology defined. By nature, that means those outside of that group are belief undefined. Now the Venn diagram is beginning to make sense, because not only would babies fall into this theology, belief, undefined group, but so would people that, for example, lost peoples that have never ever come across the concept. Animals would be in there, taking a little bit of a leap, but if we are visited by aliens, it's quite possible that they would have no concept of God. So there are all these other positions that float around in here in the belief undefined. And now the Venn diagram makes sense. Not only that, but not only is igtheism, ignorance of belief in God, ism, relevant It is the default position. So, given that there are far more worthy topics, and the pleas from many that this be a non-issue, why was it important I make this video? Well, on the one hand, and I'll get the sharp ones out of the way first, there is the point of order with regards use of a personal redefinition for atheist, by which I mean that I can with effort extrapolate from, but not actually find support for, this definition in any dictionary, as I showed in my last video, in what has to be the ultimate straw man, allocating a theological position to someone on the basis of a false dichotomy that has removed other valid stances that may be more comfortable and they may wish to adopt as more reflective of their beliefs, on what is at the end of the day a purely personal belief system over what happens to us when we die. And the given reason for doing this? Rallying troops from the ranks of the undecided for participation in a generalized war on theism, not against God per se, because that would be silly, but against his chowderhead followers. Now, given the definition of anti-theism being against belief in God-ism, would that be a fair description of this behaviour? Is it also fair to reject such a definition as being pertinent or appropriate to oneself, yet still insist that others apply a rigid extrapolation of atheism to themselves, regardless of the existence of alternative positions, such as igtheist, which explicitly excludes itself from the dichotomy proffered, as well as a variety of others, including many non-specific descriptions of what a deity is and what a deity could be. Anyway, with regards to the false dichotomy itself, because this is the only way an effective us and them can be achieved within the myriad of human belief systems, and the reasons for utilizing it, I cannot think of a single instance in human history when drawing a proverbial line in the sand such as the one offered has ever ended well, especially with terms such as coward being thrown in to brand non-combatants for whatever reason. The other aspect of this debate, which I think is important, is the ability for an individual to reevaluate their position in the event of new information or new definitions or new anything coming to light of which they were previously unaware, or having a previous understanding on an issue shown to be in error in some way. And by this I do not mean, for example, adjusting the meaning of atheism to include ignorance of belief as a subset of lacking, when it is, in fact, the precursor to having the knowledge required to make an informed decision on what one actually does believe. The default position, if you will. Refusal to adjust one's thinking like this, as I explained in my first video on the subject, can lead to one becoming fixated and fixed in one's thought processes and patterns when it comes to certain topics, at which point the arguments one puts forward can become indistinguishable from the dogmas that one is actually trying to address. Now, with that out of the way, on the other hand, there are the reasons why I can understand Kate's efforts to combat certain dogmas that are, from the global perspective, having a real effect on people's lives. a real life and death effect on people's lives. And yes, despite InventorGorilla's exhaustive feature, responding to her the other day, in which he does make some very pertinent points, many of these dogmas are, unfortunately, religious in origin. But not all of them. And IG does make an excellent point, however, in observing that, especially in America, in the main, your average Joe or Jane isn't necessarily at open risk of death as a direct result of their beliefs, sexual orientation, or other bigotries that may be the case elsewhere in this messed up world. That doesn't mean to say that so-called hate crimes or bigotry-driven crimes don't occur. They do, and they're far too prevalent in the news. But there are laws in place to redress those. So, elsewhere in the world, that isn't the case, and there are active death squads, there are active discriminations to people's detriment, to their life detriment. So yes, fight for actual causes by all means, such as same-sex rights, unjust executions, the abortion issue, erosion of freedoms through legislation, corruption in authority, and the one that I think will have the greatest effect on all the other issues just in itself, maintaining quality education in schools. If you do that, then I think you'll find as many, if not more, allies among theists who are just as outraged and just as sympathetic to those causes as you may inadvertently be alienating with your current efforts to win an entire war on theism in one go through the use of a false dichotomy to whip the dissenters into shape. In this, it could very well be that your dogma of you're either with us or against us could actually be working against you, riding on the back of a demonstrable fallacy. Yes, the stupid is the one true enemy common to all. In this, IG also makes a good point in his video, albeit a little lost somewhat in his own efforts to get unblocked. The other thing that I truly believe is common to both Bionic Dance and InventorGorilla and myself and others here on YouTube, regardless of theological stance, is a compassion and empathy for people, all people. This is what drives us. These common values are what pull us together, not which side of an imaginary line one falls. In closing, let me just remind everyone that Agent of Doubt would appreciate many a visitor to his channel to show some love for his pending breast implants. On that note, whatever you do, wherever you're doing it, and whoever you're doing it with, please, have a good one.